Hello and welcome to Get Decked, the video series where I make budget Magic the Gathering decks for your casual games night and to introduce friends and family members of the game. So we're carrying on with the Duskmourn decks here, so we're moving on to the second one, which is I Will Survive, which is a white and green deck, as you can probably guess, based all around the survivors from the set. So let's remind ourselves of the rules of Get Decked before we look at the deck itself. So these decks are 60 cards. They're designed for 1v1 games. We're only using Duskmourn cards for these decks. Mostly commons and uncommons. No cards that cost more than $2 at time recording. Limit ourselves to 12 different non-land cards for a good mix of variety and consistency. Strong themes, low to mid complexity, so it's accessible for newer players. But casual doesn't have to mean weak or bad. So hopefully you'll enjoy this deck. So let's take a look at the deck list here. So we've got 27 creatures, 24 land, 3 artifacts, 3 sorceries, and 3 enchantments. So yes, a lot of creatures, so it's kind of classic green-white, go wide with a whole bunch of creatures that we're going to buff up, and yeah, so we'll see how that works out. So let's first talk about how are we winning. So we are using all these survivors from the Duskmourn set and using their iconic survival ability, which I think is really, really cool, really flavorful and fun. So let's look at Reluctant Role Model first. So 1 white for a 2/2 and has the survival ability. So at the beginning of your second main phase, if Reluctant Role Model is tapped, you either put a flying, a lifelink, or a +1/+1 counter on it. So I think the survival ability is really, really fun because like I said, it's really, really flavorful because the whole fact of, they survived the turn. They tried attacking, they didn't die, so they're going to learn from it, they're going to get better, and there's going to be some sort of benefit. So I think it's a really simple, fun, flavorful keyword. I really, really like it. And Reluctant Role Models is really, really good. So I imagine you would give it flying first, to give it the evasion, so then it's easier then for it to keep attacking and getting the abilities then going for. And then I'd probably give it probably the lifelink and then the +1/+1 counter. So if it was just that, I think it would be perfectly fine. But then it's got the extra ability where if it dies, or another creature you control dies, if it had counters on it, you get to put those counters onto one other creature. So it's essentially giving really all your creatures like modular. So if it dies, you get to share the or you don't get to share the counters out, but you get to give them to something else. So there's the real chance here that Reluctant Role Model becomes like a really, really big threat. Say it has flying, it has lifelink, has maybe some other, +1/+1 counters on it. Maybe your opponent does deal with it because, why wouldn't they? It's becoming a big threat. But then it's fine because you just move that then across to another creature and then you just kind of carry on with it. So yeah, I really, really like Reluctant Role Model. We do have a few other ways of doing +1/+1 counters in the deck. But I think just on its own, I don't think you have to go too crazy into, using, distributing counters and stuff for this ability to be really, really strong. So yeah, really, really like Reluctant Role Model. Right, so then we've got 3 Veteran Survivors, 1 white mana for a 2/1. So at the bare minimum, it's Elite Vanguard, Savannah Lions, which is absolutely fine. And its survivability is you exile a card from a graveyard, and then as long as there are 3 or more cards exiled with Veteran Survivor, it gets +3/+3, so it goes up to being a 5/4, and it has hexproof, which is a really, really big boost. The thing is, though, I think this would take like a little bit of effort to work towards because, I was thinking like, oh wow, it's only got to exile 3 cards, but then, it's got to, survive 3 turns doing it, so that means swinging. It's only got 1 toughness, and we've got some ways of, making sure it can, the survivability can trigger more reliably without risking it too much. But there also has to be 3 cards in graveyards. I mean, that could be yours, it could be an opponent's, but yeah, I think it's a really good, strong ability, but like, I think it takes it's a few hoops to jump through, I think, to get it to work. But when it does work, then yeah, obviously it's really good. Then it's a 5/4 with hexproof. So yeah, I quite like Veteran Survivor. So at the very, very least, it's aggressively costed attacker, which you can start swinging with very quickly. Then we've got 3 Glimmer Seekers, 2 and a white for a 3/3. Its survival ability is if you control a Glimmer creature, you draw a card. But if you don't control a Glimmer creature, you make a Glimmer token, which is a 1/1 white enchantment creature. So this is quite nice. I think it's either adding an extra body to the board, or it's repeated card draw if you do manage to keep a Glimmer around. And that's the thing I think when playing green-white, a lot of creatures, fairly low mana curve. There's a risk that we just, completely play everything out and, start running low on cards. So having some sort of repeatable card draw, I think, is obviously pretty good. So yeah, I quite like Glimmer Seeker, and it's just a 3/3 on its own as well. Right, and then we've got 2 Fear of Exposure. So not a survivor in itself, but it can help get their abilities off. So it's 2 and a green for a 5/4 with trample, which is obviously very, very good. So as additional cost to cast this spell, tap 2 untapped creatures and or lands you control. So the ideal play here is obviously you cast it for 3, have a big 5/4 trample, tap down 2 of your survivors and get their survivor abilities go off as well. If that's not possible, then you can just tap 2 extra land, and then it's essentially then a 5 mana 5/4, which is fine, obviously. You can do one of each, I suppose, so it could be then a 4 mana 5/4 and also get a survivor ability. But yeah, Fear of Exposure I think is a fairly okay inclusion here to help trigger the survivor abilities without having to risk them attacking and getting them tapped that way. Then we've got 3 Orphans of the Wheat, 1 and white for a 2/1. Sort of similar to Fear Exposure here. It's here to get the survivor abilities off without actually having to risk them, because when it attacks, you can tap any number of untapped creature you control, and it gets +1/+1 until end turn for every creature tapped this way. So yeah, you can swing with Orphans, tap all your survivors, get all their abilities without having to risk them in combat, and Orphans of the Wheat is then also then a bigger more threatening creature on its own. So yeah, I think it's really, really interesting. Obviously, you could go too crazy with this, tap everything out, and then you've got nothing left, so maybe avoid doing that. But yeah, I think it's an interesting option to have here. The thing is, if you're not doing that, Orphans of the Wheat is like a little underwhelming, because then it's just a 2 mana 2/1, which is obviously not amazing. But yeah, I think I still think it's okay here to trigger the survivor abilities. So we're going to talk about what helps us win. So this is just extra like card draw and buffs and stuff. So we're going to have 3 Rip Spawn Hunters. So 2 a green and a white for a 4/4. Survivability is at the beginning of your second main phase. If Rip is tapped, you reveal the top X cards of your library, where X is her power. You put any number of creature or vehicle cards with different powers from amongst them into your hand, and then put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So most of the cards in the deck are either power 2, power 3. So I was sort of getting into this kind of, I don't know, trap of thing like, oh, so you can't get everything. Oh, it's, not very good. You could only get at most like 1 or 2 cards from it. And then I started to think like, no, that's still really good. Like being able to just like look at the top, say 4 cards, at minimum 4 maybe, because obviously we've got ways of increasing power here with +1/+1 counters and stuff. Looking at the top 4 cards and even just like drawing 1 or even like drawing 2 is obviously still really, really good. So yeah, don't fall into the trap I made here. Don't wish for Magical Christmas Land, where you look at the top 4 cards and they've all got different powers. You get to draw all 4 of them. Obviously, that'd be amazing, but like I think this is just fine enough to just be drawing consistently 1 or 2 cards of this. That's still obviously like a really good effect. So yeah, really quite like Rip. Then we've got 3 Shrewd Storytellers, 1 a green and white for a 3/3. Survival abilities, just put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. Just very straightforward, but still very, very effective. So yeah, really like Shrewd Storytellers. This is the one we kind of want to maybe tap down the most with with Orphans of the Wheat or Fear of Exposure or some of the other cards we've got here as well. Just so it can be giving the counters out to the other survivors and then making it easier for them to get their survivor abilities going off. 3 House Cartographer. This is kind of just like a land search, I suppose. So 1 a green for a 2/2. Survival is you reveal cards on the top of your library to reveal a land. Land goes in your hand, and the rest go on the bottom in a random order. So yeah, it just helps find land. We don't have a super greedy mana curve, so I don't know if House Cartographer is like really required. So I would be up to suggestions for if this is required, if you would replace it with something else. And then 3 Hardened Escort, so 2 and a white for a 2/4. Whenever it attacks, another creature you control gets +1/+0 and gains indestructible in turn. So this is obviously really nice to use on one of the other survivors, which means they're going to survive combat because they're going to be indestructible. They're going to get through. Their ability is going to go off. So yeah, quite like Hardened Escort. Obviously, can't give itself indestructible, but that's fine. It's fairly bulky anyway, so it is mostly just there to help out the other survivors and get through and I say get their abilities off. So we're going to quickly talk about what stops them winning. So this is like removal options or just general disruption. So we've got 3 baseball bats, 1 a green or white for equipment that enters, and then it gets to attach for free on something, which is an ability I always like on equipment. Gives them +1/+1, and whenever the equipped creature attacks, you get to tap up to 1 target creature, which is nice. Obviously, it's actually it's a clever design because it can do 2 things. You either tap down an opponent's creature, get a big blocker out of the way, or you bonk one of your survivors on the head. they're tapped, and then you're going to get their survivor ability at the end of the turn, which is just a really, I really like the idea of just one of the other survivors just like bonking like the shrewd storyteller on the back of the head, and he's survives the ability. Yeah, the ability goes off, and he's just like, oh my god, let me tell you a story of when I got bonked on the head by a baseball bat by one of my friends. Have a +1/+1 counter. It's just, I think, a very funny mental image. But yeah, so baseball bat I think is pretty solid, and then what I think is absolutely bonkers good is 3 Sheltered by Ghosts. So 1 and white, enchant creature you control. When it enters, you exile non-land permanent and opponent controls until Sheltered by Ghosts leaves the battlefield. So it's a banishing light effect. And it gives the enchanted creature +1/+more and lifelink and ward 2. So this is crazy good, right? Am I right in saying that? Because it's really, really strong, I think. So it's a banishing like effect is fine anyway, and then it's at 2. And you could say, oh well, it's cheaper, it's balanced because it goes on a creature. Creatures are more vulnerable. It's an aura, so it can be removed. But we're also giving the creature ward 2, so it's not that much harder to remove it, really. Or much easier to remove it, and also it's giving lifelink and also +1/+more. Yeah, I think this is really, really strong card. I could probably see pushing to have a full playset of 4 in there because it's a really good ability. Like, I would understand if the exile was like, like mana value like 4 or less or something, but no, it can be anything. Or if it was like maybe just creatures or something, but no, it is anything. And I say, and with the bonuses as well, I think it's a really, really good card. And then we've got 3 coordinated clobberings, 1 green mana. You tap 1 or 2 target untapped creatures you control. They each do damage equal to their power to a creature an opponent controls. So you can get 2 of your survivors to gang up, hit a single creature, and then obviously their survivor ability is going to go off because then they're taps. So yeah, another just nice, really synergistic card here to go with all the survivors. So yeah, really like coordinated clobbering. So we're going to quickly talk about the mana base as well. So we've got 4 Etched Cornfields, which is the green-white Friday land. Enters tapped unless a player has 13 or less life, gives you green or white. And then 12 plains and 8 forests. So I'd love to know what you think about this. That's about this deck. Do you like the survivors? Do you like their survival mechanic? I think it's really fun, but obviously I'd like to hear what other people's opinions are. If you've got any thoughts or comments about cards that you would change in this deck, like would you have more of some things, less of some things? Have I completely left some things out entirely that you think should go in here? Like, definitely stick a comment down below. Always excited to hear people's thoughts and opinions on these decks. But I'll be back next time with another one of these Duskmourn budget decks. So I hope you join me for that. But until then, thanks for watching and listening, and have a great day.